Hi there! Today we're visiting a place where there was genocide. We're visiting a place where the king's throne was. We're visiting a place where there were two castles. And we're visiting a place where a murderer is. Today we've come to York, and to start off with, we're visiting here, Clifford's Tower. So come with us and see what it's all about. So you would be at the castle and there would be a bridge leading to the bailey area, the area for everyday work for the castle. Bear in mind that's like, if you like, to keep the residence for those who are important, and then you'd get your trade going down there. So where the museum is and the courthouse is from many years ago, that would be where the general public would access court with the castle itself. That's where they would actually be when doing business with the castle. On the night of Friday the 16th of March 1190, some 150 Jews and Jewesses of York sought protection in this royal castle that you see here today. They were incited by a mob, by a gentleman called Richard Mailbissy, and others chose to die at each other's hands rather than renounce their faith. The reason why the Jews were so hated at the time was because so many of them were the moneylenders. If you couldn't afford to pay them back, what's the easiest way to deal with it? In those days, is have them killed. So that's what they did. And if you look at the walls, they say that it ran red with the blood of Jews. 150 of them died. And that castle is not huge. Originally it had 20 to 30 soldiers and a local dignitary there. So it's not a massive place, but it is certainly a place that, well, let's face it, if you're a Jew, you wouldn't want it to be cramped in there with people outside, the proverbial pickaxes and blazing torches. You certainly couldn't climb up there to get them. So that's why so many of them just kill themselves. Anyway, let's go have a look at the castle itself. It is a very large building, and the castle itself was definitely in place in some format in the 8th centuries, so the 700s, when William the Conqueror came here. But in 1066, that's when this became the stone structure. Well, eventually the stone structure. Originally it had been wooden and then built into a stone structure. This was King John in his period, 1199 to 1216, and Henry III, 1216 to 72. This was one of the key castles. During the wars with the Scots, a lot of the finances of England was transferred to here in York because they felt it was a safer place. Now, anybody knows the history of the battle between Scotland and England will know that the Scots did come down this far. So perhaps it wasn't the best idea at the time, but it was certainly an idea to store all of England's wealth in such a thick, sturdy castle. Every castle needs somewhere for water, and this is exactly what we've got down here. You can't see anything, but that's a well leading down, so if you were under siege, you had water. And with every great castle, you need a great fireplace. And literally, this one I can walk in and you can see where the chimney would have been, or just about. But you can see how the stone's all black from it. Right, we're going upstairs now to have a look in one of the old winding staircases. So let's see how windy this one is. We've been on quite a few in the past, but this one is really, really nicely tight. Great big wooden door on the first floor. We are now in the King's Chapel, somewhere where he could come and sit and pray. Now this King's Chapel was for Henry III. He always insisted if he visited somewhere he would have a private chapel to pray in, and this was his. Yes, other kings may have had the opportunity to use it, but very few actually visited York. It was right on the outskirts of everywhere. In 1684, this place was on fire. And you can see there where the bricks are. They're not modern bricks, they're from the 1700s when they repaired it. You can see what a fantastic room to have to yourself, because only the king would be allowed in here. And up we go just a little bit further, and there's a bridge. So we'll certainly have a look at that. And it's here to give you a better view of where there would have been another floor. You can see the edge of the brickwork there where it would have been. If you look out, the view is fantastic on what you can see. Right, now we're going to the garderobe, which, if you don't know what that is, neither did I. So, here we go into what's called a garderobe, which everybody else would call a toilet. This was built for Henry III as his royal toilet, and that's where he sat. Now, you may notice there's a little bit of a gully there with a light coming down from it. They've done that on purpose to show you that, in actual fact, if you were on the top and you were a guard and needed to go to the toilet, you'd go to the toilet and there's a gully that goes right down there, comes out there and goes into the toilet. And he would have had a wooden bench just about there to sit on, and that was the king's throne. Well, the toilet, but we all know what I mean by going to the throne. So, there's a bit of a picture that they've done for you. I don't know if you can see that clearly, but in essence, king's latrine, you had at the top, that's the roof, and then a little gully that would come all the way down, go through, right to outside, and that was the king's seat. So, very unusual. Now, this wasn't actually somewhere that anybody came to until after the 17th century, because it was totally inaccessible. There'd been that fire, there'd been damage, and nobody could get here until somebody built a passageway to get up here. I mean, now we've got these metal things to walk on, which are obviously a lot more secure, but I would imagine in the 1700s they built some sort of wooden platform to get up here, because it's literally a room on its own. And if you look down there, I don't know if you can see all the way down. Try my best to do it so you can see. See that light at the bottom? That's the outside. It literally just went straight out. Not the nicest smelling place in the world. Now when you do come here, there are occasions you need to duck. If I walked in, I'll just show you now, you can see I wouldn't have a head left. But there are exits from this area going straight up to the roof all over the place. Because obviously this would have been a complete floor. One of the other things about Clifford's Tower, which is very unique, and why they sometimes say the walls are pink, is because there was a time when Jews, which would be the moneylenders of the area, the people who you went if you needed cash, were hated by the locals. And they literally tried to kill them all. And this was across Europe, it wasn't just England. This was the place where in York they went to hide. They were starved and they were burned out. And so they say if you catch it on the right night, the walls actually appear pink because they're stained with the blood of the Jews who were killed here. Spooky. And this is why it was such a well-defended place. Down there you've got the river, so you can see who's coming by sea. And even today, only the cathedral and the odd church is even close to the height of York. Clifford's Tower's view is spectacular. And the fact that they've made it so you can see everything is great. Down there you've got Castle Museum. You're not allowed to actually film in there, that's why we haven't done that. And next to it, York Courts, which are still in operation today. But what a lovely place, decked out lovely. And then, if you want to have a better look down below, you can see everything down there. What a view. I'm not going to lean over too far, for obvious reasons. Probably lose my glasses down there, knowing me. So, the first one there that you can see that's signposted Castle Museum, which we're looking at now, that was the women's prison. You then had the male and the court assizes. So this was the place you didn't want to come. And this is where Dick Turpin was taken after his famous run from London to York. He was tried here and his body is somewhere over there in the distance. We might try and find it if we can. But no, it's amazing the view that you've got from here. Anybody who's coming to York, and we have for years and never been up here, this is something you really ought to take the time to do. Get yourself an English Heritage membership and it costs you less than actually going to pay to walk in for one day. Well worth spending half an hour, maybe 45 minutes here. Not a big castle, It's what's left of a castle. The keep, if you like. But well worth it. York and London are the only two cities in England that have two Norman castles. Although all that remains of the one in York, the other one, apart from this one, is a little mound with a tree on it. Literally. Because to begin with, they were wooden castles. Now, William the Conqueror, who died in 1087, started building this in 1068. In 1069, there was an uprising and the castle was burnt down, so he never actually saw this stone one, although many of his castles were converted to stone as time went on. So, we've left the castle over there. We're literally going across the river, and straight ahead of us is what was another Norman castle. The river today is still a massive part of York. Whether you're practicing for boat racing, want to go for a cruise, or maybe take your own little boat down the river. The River Ouse is quite a strong running place, and not somewhere that you'd swim in, but still a fantastic place if you're into water. So you've crossed the bridge, you see the city walls here, which we're going to go in a second, and you are on the outskirts of where the Norman castle was. Now, the best way to view it is going up this path to what is the Roman walls, which was obviously a long time built. So, you've gone up the walls, and then you find this little gate through a metal fence, and what you are now walking on is what was a Norman castle. Bearing in mind it was made of wood, so there isn't anything really left. But again, very similar to Clifford's Mount, which was eventually made in stone, this was built for controlling the locals. You maybe can just see through the woods there is Clifford's Mount and Clifford's Tower. They were part of a defence, a control system for the area. So both sides of the river, anybody coming down the river, you're cornered, you're spotted, you're under control. The main part of the city, bearing in mind it wasn't the size it is now. Most buildings would have been timber, small, and only those with any money would anything bigger than basically a one-room accommodation. But you can see where this would have been a fantastic viewing point, and most people think it's just a hill. Well, it isn't. It was one of the more important sites until the fires destroyed it. If you just go around from the Barbican, there's a church, a Catholic church over there, I believe, and going to this graveyard, you're going to find something very special. Now, the graves are obviously not very new, but one of them is extremely famous. St George's Church there is their graveyard here, has somewhere Dick Turpin's grave. First of all, he was convicted of stealing horses, which was immediately punished by death, by hanging. Him and his fellow culprit, who wasn't as famous, were taken to the Knavesmire in York and hung. But here's the literal sarcastic side to it. The person who hung him was a convicted horse thief who'd repented. Yes, that's right, he was let off. And so he actually hung Dick Turpin. So, they believe this is his grave. However, there is questions on it, and the reason there's a question on it because thieves used to steal bodies. They used to steal them for the simple reason of medical experiments, and his was one of the bodies stolen. They were very quickly apprehended, and then the body was reburied in this graveyard in quicklime to make it harder to take out and use again. But it would have been very surprising for him to have a gravestone. He was a criminal. So the fact that there's a gravestone there is more of a factor of guessing where the grave is in this very, very old cemetery. You look at this and all the gravestones are laid flat. Apart from his, a criminal. He became famous for one reason only, his horse, Black Bess. Black Bess, he jumped on her back and rode to escape the police from London to York, where he was caught. And that is why he's executed and buried here. He was actually from Essex. An Essex man who started off as a butcher, ran a inn, and turned to earning money in a cheaper, fatter, an easier way. And that's how he became a horse thief. But Dick Turpin, realistically, may have just been a horse thief from what he was convicted of, but everybody thinks him as a highwayman. He is believed to be part of a gang that went around, the Gregory gang. The Gregory gang were notorious, vicious, but there was no proof he was part of it. So, you ever wanted to know what happened to Dick Turpin? Here he is, just across from that church over there, St George's, and round the back of the Barbican. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed our little trip in York. We've seen 2 Norman castles. Yes, one, fair enough, it was a mud hill, but it was just as important as Clifford's castle was. We've seen where Dick Turpin was buried, and behind us, although obviously I can't actually video that for you because it is a courthouse, we're in the area with the courts that Dick Turpin was actually convicted in. And I still can't get over the fact that his executioner was actually somebody who had been convicted of the very same crime as he had, but had been allowed off. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed today's video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.